Here it is, folks. The final. We're here. You made it. You're still alive. If you're watching this video, you're still alive. You made it through the entire class. You have just a few days to go. This is nothing new. Might not be the most fun thing you do this week, but it is not new, and you will not have to go out on the internet and Google absolutely everything to learn something new. You may have to Google it to remember something old, but not new. So anyway, the whole idea with this lab is that you're doing a lot of what you did before, but you are introducing a new server into your network. So I had a good question earlier before this video started, and that was, are we really running all four of these? Yes. Yes, you are. So you will be running pfSense VM for your routing, your infrastructure. You'll be running your Linux Mint VM, so you can remote into all of the Ubuntu servers that you're running. The original Ubuntu server, right? The one that has DNS and DHCP and Cockpit and all that stuff. You're running that one. And then you're spinning up one new VM. This is the one that we're going to be doing the majority of the work on this go-round. Now, the thing about this particular VM is, it's a blank slate, right? You're adding it to an existing network, and then you are going to be tinkering with your existing network to make everything work. So the whole idea here is, again, you're not doing anything new other than bringing up a new VM. So install Ubuntu 1804 specifically. I think I've got a link to that up in the very, very beginning under laying the foundation. Go get it if you have lost it. If you still have it, just pop it in, install that. You're good. But make sure it's on the Linux network, right? So pfSense has two LANs. Put it on the Linux one. That way it will pull an IP address automatically from your Ubuntu, your original Ubuntu VM. It'll get DNS through that same VM, and it'll get routing through pfSense, right? That way you can do your updates. You can install packages. We'll only need to install a handful of packages, but you just need to install Apache 2, I think, and it'll pull in all the dependencies. That's what I'm getting at. So during the installation, make sure you choose a host name that is different, right? No one can have the same host name. Otherwise, you end up with weird, like, underlying Avahi errors, and then you'll end up with DNS errors because you'll make the same record, right? New and unique. Set a host name. Take a screenshot of that. So you'll be setting that in Ubuntu. Take a screenshot of your host name before you click OK or move on that page, whatever the button is. Make sure you're taking the screenshot of that. Because what I'm going to do with that, I'm going to take that host name that you set there, and I'm going to match it against the DNS record that you create later on, wherever that is, somewhere around here. So also, make sure you set a static IP address. Now, this is okay if you accidentally, and on number 2 as well, if you accidentally skip it, and you're like, I just don't have time to go back, you can set this after the fact with hostname CTL, and you can set your IP address after the fact in Etsy NetPlan. Don't forget those. Those come in very, very handy. So remember to use the reserved range. Remember at the very beginning of this semester, we chose whatever your network ID was, the first 5 IP addresses, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those IP addresses were set aside. So whichever one you're not using, pick one of those and give that to the new Ubuntu VM that you're creating. Take a screenshot of that. And so if you do skip this for some reason and you're going back and setting it after the fact, just take a screenshot of like the hostname control command. And then here, take a screenshot of your NetPlan configuration. That way I can just verify. Yeah. You may have skipped it, but you did go back and do it. Because that becomes actually really, really important. So just to clarify, because I did mention that your Ubuntu VM will be getting an automatic IP address. You will get an auto IP address right at the very beginning until you set a static one. So ultimately, this VM, this new Ubuntu VM, will have a static IP address within the first 5 IP addresses of your network that does not overlap with any other device. Here we go. I was mentioning the DNS. Here it is. So in the original Ubuntu VM, add an A and a PTR record for the forward, right? Forward is A, reverse is PTR. Lookup zones for the new Ubuntu VM, right? So let's say you named your Ubuntu 18 VM, the new one, you named it server number 2, right? Because you're so unique in your names. You will go into your original Ubuntu 18 VM, into, etc bind, find your configuration files and your zone files, and add an A record in your forward lookup that has both the name and IP address, a record in your reverse lookup zone, the reverse, right? Give it the IP address and the name. This way you can, from any machine on the network, do NS lookup Ubuntu server 2, and it will come back with the right IP address. Because just like your previous VM and just like Linux Mint, you want to be able to call these things by name. No one's going to remember that IP address. You might, because you're the IT person and you type it in so many times that there's no way you can forget it. You dream about it. But everybody else that needs to access these servers, they're not going to remember that. All right, so get those records in. Make sure you can NS lookup. Take a screenshot of those records for me. You'll prove it a little further down. So I don't need y'all to prove that it NS lookups right then. And then from Linux Mint, remember this command, SSH copy ID? You can do it manually if you want to. I made you guys do it manually. This is the easiest way. So instead of manually moving over your public key to the new server that you want to log into, and then putting it in the right directory, adding it to the right file, you can just use this, SSH copy ID. So SSH copy ID works exactly like SSH. So SSH copy ID, Leo at Ubuntu server 2. And if it, as long as DNS is working, right, because you're using that name, it will let you essentially log in, but it will immediately boot you out. But it will tell you, yeah, I've copied the keys, good to go, log in normally. And so you'll just SSH Leo at Ubuntu server 2, whatever it was, and it'll let you log in, right? Because if you have a key, you don't need a password. But and that's number 6, right? So copy your keys over, log in via SSH, and take a screenshot. Show me that you didn't have to provide a password. Show me that the key worked. Right? This is the same screenshot from that SSH one back then, except new machine. New machine, who dis? In your new VM, disable password login, right? So this is the same step, again, in the SSH keys as before. Go into the SSH configuration file, find the password authentication. I think it's password authentication, yes. And you can either just say no or comment it out. Right? Go back to that. I'm pretty sure that's the right line, but go back to this lab to verify that that is the right line that you go in and configure. So, same session that you opened up in 6, right? Because at the end of this, I say log into SSH. So in that same session, don't close it, update all the packages on the system and reboot, right? Got to have a squeaky clean, new, updated system. Do that. You always want to do that before you start installing big system-wide changing packages, and Apache is definitely that. So anyway, reconnect after it reboots, and then sudo apt update, and take a screenshot of the result of that, because really what it's going to say is no new updates needed, and that's what I'm looking for. So take a screenshot of the, yep, I'm up to date message. Then still using that same SSH session. So we opened one in 6, but it closed in 8 because we rebooted. We opened it up again in 9. And then this is the one we opened in 9 is what we're using right here. Install Apache Web Server. Right? So you can turn back the clock to this lab right here, Apache on Ubuntu. And then whatever command you use to install Apache, take a screenshot of that. Then, this bit. So still in that same lab, right? You had your web practice from this lab here, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Take all that stuff, put it in the correct directory for Apache to serve it up, and you're golden on this step. And then lastly, from Linux Mint, go to the hostname in a browser. And it should bring up your web page from the web practice here. Take a screenshot. Once you prove it, take a screenshot. You're done. Submit all that. So see, I promised nothing new. Pretty sure there's nothing new. All right, throw all those into a document, submit that, I'll grade that, and you're good. Wow, someone's already done. That is impressive. Okay, that is all I need y'all to do.